I don't blame them. Oh no, it's going to be good.
I'm very confused as to whether we're live or not. Because it says we're live. Oh, we're good.
Yeah,
We're
we're live.
live. Haha. Happy days. Oh, yeah, you can hear me listening to myself. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome, one and all, to another Bug Watch. I am your host, Davey. Hi, it's been a while. How's your family? Good. Great to hear. I'm not so good. After a wonderful weekend at the Nottingham Super Major, I am now stricken with COVID, so I apologise if that comes across in the audio. Luckily, I don't have a great deal of talking to do today, because you don't care what I think. You want to hear what this guy has to say. They said, "Hey, you're sick." Delay. They said cancel, and I couldn't keep this gem away from my viewers. And boy, is it a gem! You are gonna. We know everyone has so many questions about this list, and JP has vowed to answer them. But before we do that, just a little bit of a plug. I am working on a tournament report after my weekend, after taking Unending Swarm, which I really enjoyed. I enjoyed doing the last tournament report I did, so I'm looking forward to doing another one on Unending Swarm. I know a lot of people are anxious about using that detachment, so hopefully that can encourage you to take 161 termagants or gaunts to an event. And that'll lead to a how to win with Unending Swarm later down the line, like I did with Vanguard Onslaught. However, enough about the future. Let's talk about today. I am very excited to be joined by the one and only John Partridge. John absolutely bodied the Nottingham Super Major last weekend, going 5-0, losing to Jokel in round 6 to secure a massive third place. So, hello and welcome to John.
Well, it's nice to be here. I feel like I've managed to get myself onto quite a platform here with that result that I didn't ever expect to get onto already.
I think you're the most famous person in Tyrrell at the moment.
Oh, maybe, yeah. From the conversation we had beforehand, the people wanting to talk, yeah, it sounds like I might be. I found myself in the limelight by accident.
No, I mean it's all good. It's all good. I remember looking at the Tyranny Discord and everyone just going like, "What is going on?" And I've been speaking to other like some really strong Tyranny players who were just like, "What? No gargoyles? No Neurolictor? What is going on?" So I know a lot of people have a lot of questions. But John, please give us an introduction to yourself and how you found yourself on Tyranids.
Hi, so as I say, I'm Jonathan. I go by John P. Warhammer on Discord and Instagram. And yeah, I guess the history for me is I'm quite new to Tyranids, and this is kind of half the surprise of being where I am. I played Warhammer a decade and a half ago, back in 4th and 5th edition, just solely played Space Marines. Tyranids were a thing, but it was like, no, I was a Space Marine main. Stopped playing for about 9 years, I think I worked it out. Went and played Magic the Gathering for a little bit, and then COVID hit, and turns out you can't do much around. So I fancied a new hobby. I'd continued to read the Gaunt's Ghost novels throughout the whole time. They're literally my favourite books. If anyone hasn't read the Gaunt's Ghost books, you should definitely give them a go. They are fantastic. But it kept me always in touch with Warhammer, and I decided to go back into Games Workshop at one point. Like the bug proverbially bit. I know it's a corny thing to say, but it did. And I got back into Warhammer as 9th edition was coming out. And for anyone who does know me outside of this, I've been a Deathwatch main since 9th edition Deathwatch got released. Solely played them the whole time. Vowed to never play something else. Played them for the last 2 years to medium successes. Had a couple of 4-1s, mostly 3-2, 4-1 results. Never anything outstanding. But got to the end of 2023 and the new Space Marine book came out, and kind of Deathwatch just fell flat on its face in terms of my interest of it. The kill teams weren't as interesting anymore. You couldn't bring all those special rules together, and it was just like, oh, it gets +1 to hit and +1 to wound. And it just started to remove my interest. So I started thinking of what new army that I could possibly do. And originally, and I'm sure Tom Lohman would be a man very happy with this, I was originally going to start collecting Leagues of Votan, which I'm glad that I didn't decide to do that, because Tyranids have obviously been the thing. So I decided that I wanted a different challenge. Now, my fiance, who I'm very, very happy to say, already collected Tyranids. She was already playing Warhammer before I even met her, and she had these beautifully painted Behemoth Tyranids. So if anyone did see the army at the weekend, the Behemoth color schemes to the red skin and the blue carapace, that's all my fiance's painting. She's a phenomenal painter. And I decided for the Coventry Grand Tournament that I wanted to play something different. So we put together a Tyrannid list of what was painted for the 3-day event at Coventry. And I went 5-3 at there, and I probably had the most fun I've ever had at a Warhammer tournament. There was no pressure. It felt like there was no expectations, and I just loved every minute. Got to play against Aaron from 6++ Nids Custodes during that tournament, and it was just one of those weekends where I'm just like, I think this is my style. It's got lots of chaff units that can be used for objectives, but it's also got those big, cool monsters that either sit at the back and shoot you or run into combat like these massive, strong weapons, and the aesthetic just it grabbed me. And well, the rest, as they say, is history. And now I'm pretty much playing Tyranids going forward for the foreseeable future. I've started to add to my fiance's collection. We're now building that together. She's painting her schemes. So, for example, we've got 2 Maleceptors. One's going to be in my scheme, which is High Fleet Tiamat, and then one's going to be in her scheme of High Fleet Behemoth. And yeah, I'm decided to try and because just before Coventry, I was I didn't really know where I wanted to go with Tyranids. I'd read all the stuff online. You see all the army lists from all the US tournaments, Best Coast pairings. There is slightly less in the UK, sort of those less tournaments you get to see Tyranids really coming out of. As sort of you were saying, Davey, sort of the people you've been talking to in America, I think kind of the powerhouses of Tyranids have generally always lists have always come out of America for a while. A bit more now the UK, which is great with some of the better players dabbling with it. But also, I didn't know what detachment I wanted to play. Like you took Endless Swarm, which is a hugely interesting detachment for me for sort of team environments, and for myself to try later on if I have the models. But you've got Synaptic Nexus, Invasion Fleet, and I didn't really know where I wanted to go, so I decided to take the jumped into the 6++ Discord, onto the Tyrannid chat, and started talking with everyone and getting a bit of an idea. Started looking at new models to buy and painting up from there until we got to until we got to Coventry. Went through that. Christmas came, got a few more bits and pieces, and then it was the rush to get ready for Nottingham and what I could get ready on the table to augment what was already there. And despite going 5-0 and despite them being some of the hardest games of Warhammer I've ever played in my life, definitely the most enjoyable tournament I've ever been to, and definitely the most enjoyable army I've ever got to play at a Warhammer tournament as well. And I do not regret in any way moving on to Tyranids. They are just so much fun because they kind of do everything. They move, they shoot, they have huge amounts of movement, they shoot well, and they have combat. And I've never played an army which can just put a 30-point model on the table and go, here's one drop deployment, your go, sir. You've deployed your entire army, and I've deployed chaff, and now I get to put my monsters down where they are. So really, really good fun. So that's kind of where I've come from. I've gone from being a Deathwatch main. I've now gone the complete opposite ends of the spectrum, and I now play what my armies used to hate. So it's all good.
Absolutely. Well, it's funny actually. Just on that Discord thing. By the way, the link to the Discord, to our 6++ Discord, which has its own Tyrannid section, is in the chat. Is in the description of the video. But yes, John came into our Discord, and honestly, like the most polite, like most like humble guy, like chatting away, like, oh wow, this is a really interesting take, like really, really humble, and then just goes ahead and bodies like a super major in his second tournament with Tyranids with just what he had painted. So I think it bodes well for the future of John and his Tyranid army. But I suppose you've kind of touched on it here already in terms of where did the list kind of come from. It was all really just what you had painted, but there must have been like a style or a win condition that you already had in mind when you built the list.
Yeah, so more or less, so for Coventry, it was very much limited on what was available. Post Coventry, it was kind of like, right, what do I actually want? We bought the Leviathan pre-release box, the Leviathan release box for 10th edition because I played Space Marines. My fiance played Tyrannid, so we thought, fantastic, we'll get all the models. But they'd never been painted or made. So coming out of Coventry, my Coventry list was very heavy on like output pieces. Like I had a couple of Exocrines, had 9 Zoanthropes, the Haruspex, the Trigon. But it was also running a lot of stuff that I didn't necessarily feel was optimal. So I had like the Parasite Mortrex in there, which unfortunately, when you pair it up against Death Leaper, it doesn't match up. There are night and day difference between the two of them. And I just felt that it kind of ran out of steam a little bit. So when I decided to move to Tyranids, the things on the list was like, I knew that the first things I wanted to get hold of was the third exocrine. I wanted to get hold of Death Leaper. Wanted more sort of chaff pieces. So termagants, excuse me, were a bit easier to come by because Fiance had 10 of them ready, and I had 20 ready to go in the Leviathan box. So that was kind of quite easy. And I think the list development going out of Coventry was very much how do I develop a list which performed reasonably well to go 5 and 3 and I'm very happy with, and actually won a Tyranid mirror against an arguably better Tyranid list. It was very much more your conventional triple exocrine, Maliceptor, Norn, Neuralictors, Death Leaper, Gargoyles. It had Pyrovores, but it had all the stuff. So it was like, okay, well, what things do I want to build up? So I wanted to get hold of some Pyrovores. Like they're great. They're 30-point models that are a deployment drop, or you can bring them in from outflank or from strat reserve, and they're just really useful pieces to have. But one of the things I was finding is I was having to put down monsters before my opponent had really dropped anything like anti-monster. So there would be points where I'd put it like again, even like against Aaron, for example, against Custodes. I put a monster down before he put a Caladius Grav tank down, and if the Caladius sees a monster, the monster generally vanishes very quickly. Those things are very efficient into monsters. So one of the big things I wanted to change was I wanted more stuff to go down before anything important had to be put on the board, and that the development that kind of drew me down that path. So the first things that I wanted to look for was like, what can I do to just make my scoring slightly more efficient? So the Termagants and the Pyrovores to kind of give me more utility pieces, just stuff at early drops, can put stuff down. It doesn't really matter where it goes. It moves fast. I've got a Hive Tyrant, so it can advance and shoot. There were certain things I wanted in the list since I started it. I've got quite a fondness for my 2 Gene Stealer units. And I've kind of every single iteration I've built has had them in, and they will be in there up until the point where the meta doesn't allow them to go in. We'll kind of get onto that sort of the description of that a bit later on. But again, even going into Nottingham, it was kind of limited by what I could get ready in time versus using what I did. Now, I'd used the 2 Exocrine Haruspex Trigon package at Coventry, and it put that in with a 3rd Exocrine because the Trigon gives you this really weird threat piece that generally doesn't kill its points back, but it will, over the point of the game, either gain you more points or just make your opponent make decisions which are not optimal. Because it deep strikes 3 inches away, a rapid ingress is 3 inches away, and you just appear like most of the games. It'll kill, for example, it'll kill 10 cultists, and it might kill a tank, and it'll die in 2 turns. But in those 2 turns, it's stolen your opponent's backfield objective. It's potentially got you storm hostile objective. It's probably got you behind enemy lines, and all of those things just add up into efficiency. But also, you've just dropped an 11 wound toughness 10, 14 wound monster in their back line, which has a bucket load of dice that they have to deal with. Otherwise, they're just going to lose points. So you just find your opponent having to move their army apart slightly, which then allows you to pick on specific things. And even not having the most optimal Tyranid list, you can still take advantage of that because you're dealing with, say, 3/4 of your opponent's army rather than 100% your opponent's army, because they've still got to consider the monster that suddenly dropped in their back line sat on the home objective, which that might be all it does all day, all game, but that's however many points per game that you've suddenly just gained plus secondaries that the opponent literally cannot deal with unless they dedicate real resources. And it's kind of the same thing with the Gene Stealers. Their toughness 4, the 2 wounds over 5 of a vulnerable save. They don't look like they're hugely impactful, but being toughness 4 versus toughness 3, having an invulnerable save, and being a 5-man unit actually does make it quite annoying for your opponent to deal with. They'll tank a charge from 5 legionaries. Probably a number of them will survive. And then over the course of combat, they'll probably actually kill the legionaries. They're great for killing chaff. Anything they go into short of something relevant, it's like will probably kill it. They'll kill scouts, they'll kill cultist units, they'll do a decent number on like anything that's toughness 4, multiple wound, 3 up save, because you've got a bucket load of dice. You outrate those opponent's units. You've both got the same saves. You probably go first. You probably do more damage. And I just really like them because they're fast. They scout 8. They move 8. They're very hard to block out. And if your opponent doesn't do anything, you can hit your opponent's lines in the first turn and take the home objective if they haven't got the right thing. There is a world where you go first. You scout forward 8. You scout 8 inches forward with 5 termagants, and you kill the 10 cultists on the home objective turn 1. they'll probably die on the way back, but your opponent has to deal with these things, and they're not insignificant to deal with. They have to dedicate something more than a couple of bolters, because 2 wound toughness 4 and two gene stealers will still do a lot of damage. And
Yeah, so it feels like you're just trying to make your opponent make bad decisions, right? You
yeah,
disrupt their plan overall.
it's more putting enough stuff in front of them where it's kind of like, how do they manage what's in front of them? And it was the decision point that drew me to 2 units of 5 rather than 1 unit of 10. The Broodlord went in because I had 90 points left, and I think it's the most efficient piece to go in for that, of what I had. Because the Broodlord functions in the same way. It's a missile that goes in and will kill a character. It's got enough attacks and enough damage to kill most characters in the game. You can epic challenge them out, and then the unit that it's with may not kill you on the way back, depending what it is. They're just useful pieces because they can hit hard and they can be disruptive because they're very quick and they're very small units and they can fit between screens. But they also trade up with most opponents' screens very easily, and you can tag multiple things, make it difficult for your opponent. In one game, I'm sure we'll get onto it slightly later, I wrapped up a rhino. They just stand there, like they won't kill the rhino, but they can't be shot. They have to be dealt with in combat, then they're in the open, etc. So we could go through the whole list. I don't know how you want to kind of discuss it through, but kind of the development from Coventry to Nottingham was kind of where did I want to take the list, and that was Death Leaper, Exocrines, Pyrovores, and Termagants. That's kind of where I started off.
Nice. Okay. Cool. I mean, you've kind of gone through most things in the list. Is there anything you haven't mentioned yet? Actually, I think we had a good chat about the Termagants prior to the show starting, but maybe worth touching on that. And this is, and guys, one of the things obviously Jonathan mentioned before was how like a lot of lists come out of America, but the one thing with America is their terrain setups are very different to ours in the UK. So we have the UKTC terrain, and I think Jonathan found a really cool little spot for 10 Termagants.
Yeah, so eventually I want to include gargoyles. Like gargoyles are incredibly good. They move incredibly far. Obviously, shoot and fade, fire and fade. It is really impactful. There is a little niche for termagants though. Obviously, we all know the play. You put one model on an objective. If it gets killed, you endless mulch you back on, or you move away from the enemy, or if they advance on, you put termagants on an objective and you deny them that play. So your opponent has to play slightly differently around the reactive move. The other nice thing about 10 termagants is they're a small enough unit footprint that you can hide them in one of the small UKTCLs, and you cannot be seen without the opponent coming all the way around. Whereas 10 gargoyles has a rather large footprint purely because of the wingspan of the models and how difficult they are to put in. 10 termagants fits very nicely into a little L, and they're very difficult to shift from there. A number of games, 10 termagants would just go and sit on an objective in a quarter and would score 5 points every turn, plus engage on all fronts or cleanse or something else.
Secure,
exactly, because 10 termagants is 20 OC. You can't charge them because you're more than an inch because you sit them an inch back from the wall, but they're a small enough footprint that the opponent has to come all the way around an L. And even if they do kill them, then they don't kill the whole unit. You just regrow D3+3 models, so you're regrowing anywhere between 8 and 12 OC back onto an objective. They're just a really nuisance unit to deal with. And for 60 points, I'm happy for a unit of 10 gaunts to just sit on an objective. So the main reason for not having gargoyles is they aren't painted yet. But I still think even if I go into tournaments, I will be taking probably 2 units of 10 termagants because they do form this really niche little thing where they can just sit in a corner, not be seen, and just score points. Oh, and they also had flesh borers because that's what Leviathan comes with. They didn't have Spine Fist because Leviathan doesn't come with Spine Fists. That's the simple answer.
Yeah, it's super annoying that I obviously took Unending Swarm. So the way I did it, because I was too frugal to go and buy loads of Spine Fist, like a box of Termagants.
Yeah.
So I went on eBay and bought loads of Leviathan Termagants and then a massive box of Spine Fist arms, and then stuck them to the Termagants.
It's a good idea. I might have to steal that one.
Never too well, but never mind.
I might have to steal that idea. Actually, it's quite a good one. I like that.
I think it's definitely passable. Definitely passable. I'm trying to think if there's anything else in your list that the Haruspecs is one I think that a lot of people would be interested in as well.
I like the Harus. One of the things with Tyranids is outside of the Gene Stealers, you don't have a unit which has just got a huge volume of admittedly the Ravenous have 21 attacks, the Gene Stealers have 20, but they're all like strength 4, strength 5, damage 1. They don't have anything that'll run into like a chosen unit and kill most of the chosen unit and survive the way back. The Haruspex does that. For 125 points, I think it's an incredibly efficient machine when you do get it into the right places. 14 strength 7, -1 damage 2 attacks, and 4 strength 14, -2 damage d6 +1 attacks. There are extra attacks plus potentially sustained hits 1. Is a lot of dice to throw at your opponent. And if you look at what's like really good right now, it's like Chosen. You put them on a 4-up save. There's a 50% chance to fail. The AP one, there's less Terminators around, so the AP one feels less bad, especially if you run like against Necrons. You can bring it in from outflank. You can force them to reactive move one of the 2 units, and then the Haruspex hits the one. You hope they move away from the Haruspex because then the other one's sat in the open, and the Exocrine and the Hive Tyrant can deal with it. But 14 strength 7 attacks against Wraiths with exploding 6s is a lot of output, because the -1 puts them on a 4-up invulnerable save, which they had anyway. So it's just I find it's a very useful 125 point melee piece that people do have to respect, because you do just throw a bucket of dice at your opponent if they don't respect it.
Did you start it on the board in the games?
It always went in strat reserve. Most of in all but one game, it would so in all but one game it came on from rapid ingress, even if that's on turn 3. At the point that it's coming on, most armies don't have anything left that can kill it, because the Exocrines will generally deal with a lot of the stuff. And 2, presenting a Haruspex and Trigon threat out of rapid ingress does force your opponent into very difficult decisions. So generally the Trigon would always go in reserve. The Haruspex went in reserve as well. And then depending on if my opponent just mispositioned, I could either rapid ingress a Haruspex or rapid ingress a Trigon into the board, because no one's going to move. Literally no one screens out a Trigon. It deep strikes 3 inches away from you. It's literally pointless. So most of the games I'd be rapid ingress the Trigon in turn 2. But there was a game where I rapid ingressed in the Haruspex after my opponent's chosen unit had moved up right next to my Zoanthropes. And it's far enough back that as soon as they connect with the Zoanthropes, I can heroic intervention the Haruspex into combat. But what it meant is when the Haruspex did go in, it was only 2 chosen that could target the Haruspex. So the Lord was in combat with the Zoanthropes. Now, are you going to activate your Demon Hammer Lord on 6 Zoanthropes? Well, you probably will do, but then the next turn, the Lord has damage 2 versus a Haruspex, and the Haruspex will win that combat. And that chosen unit plus Lord is more expensive than the Haruspex. And admittedly, that combat he rolled quite badly. He only killed 2 Zoanthropes and did 5 wounds to the Haruspex, and then lost most of the unit on the way back. But it's those sorts of things that, because you've got those multi threats coming out of deep strike that are very impactful when they do come from rapid ingress, it's just that nice little dynamic of, does your opponent commit or do they not? In which case, then you drop the Trigon in, and if the Trigon comes in, it's very easy to get it out of lines of sight. And then, like for example, you don't want to charge a Rhino into Trigon because it's strength 9 and it should pick it up. Versus and if they do commit, you can then bring the Haruspex on and pick up the pieces. And generally at that point, you've probably hit quite an important unit, be it Wraiths, be it Chosen, and the Haruspex can then kind of run freely into the middle of the board and sit OC4 on the objective. And if they don't commit, you drop a Trigon, and they still have to deal with it, and the Haruspex is still sitting there in strat reserve, ready to go the next turn.
Yeah, absolutely. Super, man. I'm trying to think of anything else that was in the list that kind of stood out, but I think they're the ones that people have generally picked up. Interesting though, you said obviously you had to prioritize what you would put in your list following Coventry, but you didn't prioritize Neurolictors.
Neurolictors are great. Please don't be under any misunderstanding. Neurolictors are fantastic. And they are, I'm literally looking at 2 of them above my computer at the moment that are next on the block to get done alongside the Maliceptors. But it was very much like, do I want 20 Termagants or do I want 2 neurolictors? And I decided to go for the termagants because I wanted more just random stuff on the board, and losing a neurolictor is it feels quite impactful versus just losing. It's toughness 5, 7 wounds, 4 up invulnerable save. Fantastic profile. It's very difficult to remove. 10 termagants, but if it's on, so it kind of comes down to this whole: how do you want to play the game? 10 termagants getting tagged on an objective by a rhino doesn't matter. You out OC the rhino. It's pointless doing it. But if you have a rhino go into a neurolictor, the objective's gone. So it was that priority. I felt I personally wanted to do to prioritize in that window between Coventry and Nottingham was getting the third exocrine done, because the damage output from the exocrines is the most important thing I think right now. And then sort of getting the chaff pieces in. So getting Death Leaper done, which I think is the best infiltrating model, which is why it got prioritized over the neurolictors. The fights first. Having fights first is really scary against a lot of opponents.
Yeah.
Because you do go first no matter what happens. The pyrovores are just really useful pieces. 30 points ago, they're gold dust. So that's why the neurolictors went in. They'll be definitely going into the list going forward. I've started to think of what I want to do to develop the list going forward, and how I want it then to play with those additional pieces. And the neurolictors are part of that. Like, for example, I had a Broodlord, I had Tyrant Guard, and I have Raveners, and all of those potentially could change out for neurolictors, gargoyles, etc.
Yeah. Well, one of the things you said just before we started speaking, because a lot of people will be going, "Oh, this geezer just took what he had painted. Like, I can't really take much from this." But I think one thing that they could take from this is, we were having a chat beforehand about the way you looked at Tyranids in terms of how your opponent beats Tyranids. If you'd just like to touch on that, because that was a really interesting thing that you pulled out.
Yeah. So, no matter how you play Tyranids, no matter what you have in it, you'll like Tyranids score points incredibly efficiently. So Biovore is potentially the best secondary scoring machine in the game. We all know that. We all accept it. Number one, the spore mines are deployed in your shooting face. They can't be overwatched. It's a 25 mil base. It's almost impossible to screen out without dedicated resources. So the Tyranid mirror is like the one place where the Biovore's a bit rubbish, because you just have 40 models in your deployment zone. You're not putting it down. But it's a really useful piece. 3 times 10 termagants is great for scoring primary. They stand behind ruins really well. They're impossible to charge. And they've got a massive amount of OC on objective that anything short of a knight or an armiger or a war dog is never taking it off of you without physically getting into you. So I basically was like, I know Tyranids are not the strongest, but what are they really good at? Well, they're really good at scoring points, and they're reasonably good in a lot of matchups at bullying primary. Eldari is probably the one exception, because just the way Eldari plays is just really obnoxious to play against with warp spiders. But you can really bully primary, because if your opponent doesn't kill a whole Termagant unit or a whole Gargoyle unit or a whole Hormigaunt or Neurogaunt or whatever whichever one you want, and leave the Endless Multitude units, you get to regrow D3+3. And that's those 4 models minimum is probably more OC than whatever your opponent has just put on the objective. So there's this real dance that your opponent has to play with of full commitment, but also not then presenting their entire army to you. So, for example, if you put 10 Termagants on an objective with a unit of Wraiths, well, the Wraiths don't hold it anymore. The Wraiths also then will probably kill your Termagants, but then they're in the open, and there's a good chance that you can kill them on the way back. The best example of that was versus World Eaters, and it's like, you can't kill 30 Termagants without getting into combat, but you don't want to be in combat with 30 Termagants, because then you're going to be in the open to 6 Zoanthropes, 3 Exocrines, and then get charged by a Hive Tyrant and Tyrant Guard, and potentially Haruspex. So it's kind of the thing that I really enjoy about Tyranids. It's got this really good game plan of scoring points, even if you're not killing your opponent massively efficiently. In the first round, and we'll go through them all in more detail against Knights, like Tyranids don't kill Knights very well, but Knights do not enjoy trying to get to 10 Termagants that are hidden behind a wall that they can't charge into without then standing in the open, and even 2 War Dogs doesn't out OC 10 Termagants or 10 Gargoyles or 10 Hormigaunt. Name whatever endless multitude unit you want. the battle line, it basically creates this really interesting play pattern where you can bully the primary in a lot of matchups, but also score secondaries. I don't think I played a single game up until the game against Eldari, and I think even in the game against Eldari, I max secondary every single game. There was never an issue scoring secondary points, and I think that was really one of the things I wanted to play to after Coventry, where I didn't always do that, and just have that strength of being able to go, cool. I've got full secondary, I've got 45 secondary, and I'll score my primary, and we'll see what the score is at the end of the game. But good luck denying Tyranids if you can't get to the stuff that matters. I think you're on mute.
Classic. You said you scored 90 in every game except for the one against Jockle, right?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I think my lowest score was low 90s.
Yeah,
Somewhere between 90, 92, 93, and 100 every game. It's until I met Jockle, and even in that game, like I wasn't winning it, but I still scored 76 points, and I scored like 5 primary every turn. And a lot of that is driven off the fact that it's like, do you want to play like Eldari struggled to deny Tyranid scoring at the best of times because of spore mines. But it's very much the game of how do you want to realistically play out this game, and one of them is not secondary denial, it's primary denial, because Tyranids will just score. And I think that's something I really do enjoy about the list, about the army itself. No matter what version of the list you play, if you have the right tools, you'll score secondaries.
Was there any matchups going into the tournament you were a little bit concerned about?
Obviously Eldari, Necrons as well. So the problem with not the problem with Tyranids, that's the wrong way to put it. But one of the challenges with Tyranids is your damage output looks great. It's lots of damage 3, lots of AP. It's like AP3 damage 3 is your bread and butter. Damage 3 is like the bread and butter of Tyranids, and it matches up in really well into so many matchups. Even Wraiths, it isn't terrible. Like they got 4 wounds, but it's just good because it's like 3 damage. You're gonna go through. They're gonna have a Fiono Pain, so actually 3 damage is 2 damage. So it takes less time to kill with an Exocrine than it would with damage 2, just on the averages of dice. But you don't have a huge amount of it. And I definitely went in there worrying more like CSM, obviously, like it's incredibly powerful. We all know how good CSM is. We all know how good Eldari is. But if you take those out, I was a bit worried against against Necrons, just literally trying to kill between 12 and 18 Wraiths is quite scary. And Chaos Knights was the other one because Tyranids don't have the best anti-tank. Like I had 6 Zoanthropes and it still didn't feel great, purely because it's most of your shooting is less than strength 10 without any Maleceptors, and the Zoanthropes are 24-inch range. Like yes, they have a good threat range because advance and shoot from the Hive Tyrant, but it's not a huge amount of strength otherwise. So Chaos Knights was definitely scary, and then the 2 ones, and then Necrons because I never played them. Because I don't play as many games as I would like sometimes, I generally go into some matchups a little bit more cagey because I've never played them before. So, for example, I've never played against World Eaters in 10th edition. I've never played against Chaos Knights in 10th edition. I hadn't played against Leagues of Votann, but because I wanted to play them, I'd had a little bit more sort of time to think about it. So I went into all these games not really understanding the matchup massively, but just trying to basically work out what the enemy's trying to do and sort of play around it from there. So it was less what was I scared of and more like just understanding how my army worked versus in theory what the enemy was, because that's kind of what I had to work on. But if I was to say what was scared of, probably Chaos Knights the most, because it's that huge amount of OC, and 13 armor goes 12 is a lot.
No, absolutely. So with that in mind, then, do you want to give us a rapid fire take through of day 1 of the tournament?
Right, so day 1 was literally the nightmare start. It was Chaos Knights with 13 War Dogs. And that was, I looked at the army and I'm like, this is not, I've very rarely started 0-1, and I didn't want to start doing it this time, but this was quite a scary start. 6 Brigands, 4 Carnivores, 2 Huntsmen, and the Stalker is a lot of just models. But they didn't have any demon allies. And I think Chaos Knights does need those demon allies to just do actions, be really annoying. And I went first, which I think was the most powerful strategy I did in a couple of my matchups, was going first. And then I shot 6 zoanthropes, 2 extra crins at a carnivore and didn't kill it. And I was like, well,
You gotta love Tyranids, man.
yeah. I'm like, this is going really well. The next turn I killed 4 war dogs, and it kind of went better from
swingy,
there.
right? It's so swingy.
It was. The zoanthropes went from not killing anything to killing 2. I'm like, cool. This is how the game's going to go. And because we were on the sort of the dawn of war, so the long table edge, generally you end up kind of turning it into hammer and anvil, and you kind of castle in your corner with your big ruin, and that's mostly what I did. Trigon and Haruspex obviously went in reserve. And then I just sat 10 termagants on the objective on the left, which is behind one of the big L's. And war dogs have to come all the way around that to get to them, and can't just run it. Like normally, if you have war dogs, you just want to run 2 old war dogs on an objective and go, cool, this is my objective. Again, you can't do that versus 10 battle line models from Tyranids, and the 60 points, and you don't mind if it then walks around, because if it walks around the corner, it then gets shot. So that game was very much down to, I think my opponent slightly overextended. He had nothing in strat reserve, so everything was on board, so there were no tricks. Everything was in front of me, which was one of the best parts of that matchup, I think. And yeah, I just managed to just score points, kill some models, and eventually just got to the point where my opponent literally couldn't score points anymore, because he was having to dedicate, he took tactical objectives, which meant that to score any secondary points, he was having to dedicate armigers or war dogs to doing cleanse, deploy teleport homers, trying to get behind enemy lines by advancing them, and it just generally meant that every single time that he was having to do these tactical cards, he was cutting his firepower, because I was able to target this. Like, I was able to clear one half of the board and then just slowly work my way across. Trigon deep striked in, killed a huntsman, was just really annoying for him, because it's like, it's a big model, it will run around and just be super annoying. It scores me secondary points, it cleared a corner, and it was just, it was a snowball effect, and it just meant that it was able to pick it up from there. So game 1 was great. Worst matchup I could have imagined, short of Yokul Zeldari, and it was a win, so we're happy with that. Round 2, World Eaters. Another army I've never played in 10th edition, so that was a interesting one. The standard 2x3 Exalted, 8-bound, 1x6 Exalted, 8-bound, 1x3 8-bound. 10 Berserkers in a Rhino with Khan, and 5 Berserkers with a Master of Executions in another one, Angron and Jackals. And really scary when it gets into you, apart from it has to go through 30 termagants. And I just literally lined up 30 termagants in front of my opponent and said, if you can deal with this and get to me through this, you can probably win the game. And I very much played that game of, I remember I've listened to like a podcast that sort of Vic's been on, and he plays a very passive game style and wins kind of at the end of the game. And I kind of just had to play it that way, because by stepping out of that sort of zone of models, then I wouldn't be able to take a charge from them. Like 6 Exalted 8-bounds will kill anything in my army without even breaking a sweat. So managed to pull myself through that one again on secondaries. The Trigon dropped in his back corner, killed the Jackals, took his home objective, and was just super annoying the whole game. The Haruspex came on and killed 3 8-bound, and then killed the Rhino and sat on that objective. Angron got committed super late in the game, which kind of helped. I think they were very scared of what 6 Zoanthropes would do to Angron.
Ah, interesting.
Well, because he can't get through me, and I think when we spoke at the end of the game, he goes, I should have just shoved and made you choose what you want us to deal with. And I'm like, yes, you probably should have. So I was very lucky that you didn't, because it meant I could deal with the Rhinos, the Berserkers, randomly playing against Berserkers with 10 termagants in front, shooting them, and then not necessarily wanting to blood rush 2 guys into 10 termagants is quite pleasant, because they don't necessarily kill 10 termagants and then they can't do anything, and then I get to hit the back with a Hive Tyrant, or they come close enough for the Hive Tyrant to also get into them. So very hard game, very good player, lovely guy. I think just maybe made the mistake with Angron, and just not being able to kill screens is really good. So 2-0, super happy. Got through matchups that I was unsure of, and then round 3, Necrons. Michael Boyle playing Necrons, playing Canoptic Court, 30 Immortals with 2 Lords, 12 Wraiths, and double Catan, and I just looked at them, I'm like,
yikes.
Great.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Just what I need to end day 1. We'll be 2-1. I've got 1 win to go 3-2, and I'll be super happy. And I went second. And boy, oh boy, that is a hard matchup going second. When 1 unit of Wraiths infiltrates, this was in the old conversion map, so when you're deployed in your 2 quarters with the 9 inches in the middle. We both worked out that he's not killing my monsters with his Wraiths. They aren't great into monsters, but they need to get on objectives and be super annoying. I think I got lucky. I deployed Death Leaper up in one of the quarters, just in case to investigate signals. I actually went second. Picked up my Raveners at the end of turn 1. In his turn, and then in my turn 1, drew investigate signals, and I could drop the Raveners in 1 quarter, Spore Mine in the next, Death Leaper, and then the Zoanthropes in my home quarter, and scored 8 secondary points on turn 1 for investigate signals.
It's not a bad start, right?
And the great thing about Raveners is because they deep strike, they can go up turn 1 and then come back down turn 1. It's one of those bizarre ones. They then died, but they scored me points. So hey ho, that's what Raveners are there for. I got very fortunate in that game though. So I moved my Exocrine and my Hive Tyrant up to threaten the Wraiths. They did the reactive move back behind cover, and instead I shot up. I killed all his Canoptic Scarabs. So his secondary, he'd taken fixed objectives. He took deploy teleport homers and bring it down. So his Catan was now having to do deploy teleport homers, which for anyone who's played against Catan doing teleport homers, it's fantastic.
Yeah, please do that.
They're not running into your lines trying to do deploy teleport. In fact, he never deployed a teleport homer in my deployment zone, which really, really helped. I got very fortunate, so I moved up my Exocrine and my Hive Tyrant. His race then came out and charged the Exocrine, but left them within 6 inches of Death Leaper, who heroiced into them, and then killed his Technomancer. Because 6 strength 7 -2 damage to precision attacks does generally kill Technomancers.
Yeah, I really enjoy heroic intervening Death Leaper. It is some of the best feel goods that you ever see.
So the Technomancer went down, and then 6 Wraiths with that Feel No Pain is a lot less scary than 6 Wraiths with a 5-up Feel No Pain. And they died over a couple of turns. That allowed me to prioritize that objective. And in the end, it was a 95-90 victory.
Ooh.
Yeah, we were totaling it up as we went through the game. Again, I played from behind in that game. I scored 45 primary points. I scored 25 of those primary points in turn 5 because that mission was yeah, it was the one where you get 5 victory points for each objective you hold. I scored a 10. I scored a hold 1, hold 2, and then 15 extra points. And it's like, cool. I've just scored all my primary, and I got a 95 because I scored them all in the final turn.
Yeah, good game management, man. Good game management.
That's all you can do. Against that army, you have to play that way. You have to play super cagey with it. And you just have to hope that that strategy works because Necrons are incredibly scary to play against. Just because of how hard they are to kill. The output's not that terrifying outside the Immortals. Like six Wraiths looks like a lot of attacks, but on average they'll do without any rerolls.
They tend to take the Marine, the profile better into Marines rather than the 8 attack whip coil thing, right?
Yes, so they take the 4 strength 6 -1 damage 2, which does not line up well into monsters. Like if they don't have rerolls, then they're hitting on 4s and they're wounding on 5s, and they'll do sort of 4 or 5 wounds. You'll save 2 or 3 of them. You'll take 4 to 6 damage, and that takes 3 turns to get 3 combat phases to kill a monster, while your monster is slapping them down with much more efficient profiles. So I managed to drag myself out that matchup. Get to the end of day 1, somehow 3-0, and I am.
You must have been buzzing, right? How are you feeling after day 1?
I'm ecstatic. Like I've never started 3-0 at a tournament. It just felt really good, and I was shattered. I was done for the night. I went home. I went back to the hotel and collapsed. We went and watched. I went back with my fiance came up with me, so we were back at the hotel watching stuff, and I'm just like, I'm done. Peace. I'm going to bed.
So
we live in South Oxfordshire, so it's only a couple of hours up to Nottingham. So we had a hotel which was 10 minutes down the road from the venue. Just chilled. It was great, but I was shattered. The Necron game is like I get on so Michael Boyle, my opponent, lovely guy, knew him from before, great game, really enjoyed it. But it was one of those really tense games in a really good way. It was very clinical. We were not clinical in a negative way, but it was played the right way with a lot of fun, and I did enjoy it. And it was just kind of one of those games that I would happily play again 10 times out of 10 because it was just very rewarding game.
Super nice.
So day 1 done, absolutely shattered. Didn't celebrate. Went home. Didn't do what the 6++ guys did. Didn't go to Rock City and come and hang in the following day.
Yeah,
but fair place to them. Nottingham has a very good nightlife. I went to university in Nottingham, so I know it really well. So I know all the places they went to, which is quite funny. Listening to
Oh.
the podcast they did yesterday.
I did bail quite early. I think I went to bed about 11. But Tom, who I was sharing a room with Tom, and Tom rocks in at 3 a.m. with a kebab, and I'm like, oh my god,
Nice. Just what you
the
need.
smell of a kebab when
It was
you're not drunk anymore.
that was terrifying.
Yeah.
So kind of the end of day one, I don't think I lucked out of any matchups. I think I played them well. I think it was more I just think I relied heavily on Tyranids just scoring points and just against Knights I was definitely more proactive. The second two matchups was definitely more reactive and just tried to let them show their hand, show what they were doing, and then just pick things up on the way back through.
I know all the missions in day one are hold 2, right? Hold 2 for 10 points.
One of the I think they are, yeah.
Yeah, and then priority targets the last one.
The second mission is hold one, hold more, kill one, kill more.
That's right, yeah.
Which is very scary for Tyranids with spore mines.
Horrible.
I only shot the spore mine at ability once that game because I don't want to give. And it was on turn 5. I went second, so I don't mind chucking it out. Then it doesn't matter because it can't die. So instead, I ended up shooting pot shots into jackals. Like it's D3 plus 2, it will kill 2, and it just means that the Trigon has more space to come down in. And when the Trigon does appear, he'll shoot away the rest and then charge whatever's on the objective. It was like Lord Invocatus was on the objective, so I managed to charge in and just kill that, which was great, and it works really well.
Opponents love it when Biovars shoot them, don't they? They're like, "What? It shoots as well?"
Yeah, exactly. It has another mode other than putting the kill point on the board. Yeah, but that gets quite scary when your opponent's doing kill one, kill more. So yeah, that's definitely one of my least favorite missions playing Tyranids because you have so much random chaff. Like a single Pyrovore is amazing for 30 points until you realize it has 5 wounds and toughness 6 and a 3-up save, and it gets one shot by a tank, and you're like, that was a kill point.
Yeah,
that's not ideal.
Which is onto that as well, eh? And they're like, "Oh, I'm going to stop shooting the exocrine. I'm going to shoot this little thing because it's going to score me 4 points every turn."
Exactly. So yeah, got quite good. I was very happy with day one. So rock into day 2, and I'm against David from Glasshammer and his incredibly painted Chaos Space Marine army. If you haven't seen it yet, his Chaos Space Marine army is beautiful. The guy's an incredible painter. And he was playing Chaos Space Marines. Quite a typical list. Triple Chosen Lord, 3 units of 5 chosen in Rhinos, 2 Legionary units of one of the Rubric Warpflame units, which maxed out the Rhinos, 2 Forge Fiends, only 2 Obliterators, 10 Cultists, and then he had a unit of the Cursed Cultists with Dark Commune. The strength of the Nid list I was playing, solely in that matchup, sits within the 6 Zoanthropes, that they will one-shot a Cursed Cultist unit. When I was at Coventry playing against Bethany and her version, which had 2 of them, she put a Cursed Cultist unit in the middle of the board and went, yeah, it's pretty much my objective. 6 Zoanthropes wrapped around the corner and just annihilated the whole unit. Just one-shot the unit. 6d3 quad blast. It's like 24 shots with exploding 6s. And it's just a ridiculous amount of shots. I think it does like 30-odd wounds eventually to the unit, and they can't survive through that with D3 damage and stuff like that. It will generally one-shot the unit. So that unit then kind of was secluded to sitting on an objective. Now, David did get a bit unlucky on his go turn. So he went first. He played very cagey, which I think favoured me a little bit because it allowed me to set up the screens a little bit more. So when he eventually went for it, one of his chosen units failed a 7-inch rerollable charge. And I think that kind of just put him out a little bit. So he hit an exocrine with 1 unit, rolled really badly and didn't kill that exocrine. And then the other unit went in, and then the other unit, which was on the bottom of the board, went into the Zoanthropes and then got countercharged by the Haruspecs. And that, I think it was just one of those go turns where you need everything to go right, and it just kind of fell foul on his face. And
you mentioned this when the pre-chat as well, right? You rapid ingress the Haruspecs.
Yes.
Once you noticed that the chosen were going into the Zoanthropes.
Yeah, so the Zoanthropes from a home objective behind the ruin. It's a 10-inch charge, but if they hit it, I lose my home objective. Whereas if I can get an exocrine on, the exocrine and the Biovore, assuming like if the Haruspex doesn't kill any chosen, something's gone incredibly wrong. But OC4 and OC1 will mean I still hold the home objective, even if they get the chosen, even if they kill the Zoanthropes. Now, he unfortunately rolled really badly in that combat. So it just meant that when it did connect, I was just able to mop up over the next couple of rounds of combat. And yeah, Davey was one of the nicest guys to play. He got very unlucky in a couple of key moments, but overall it was fine. It was just those couple of key, like failing a 7-inch rollable charge, but then hitting the 10-inch charge at the bottom of the board, which didn't matter as much. It was just kind of that sort of game. So again, just scored secondaries and scored another 100, and somehow I'm now 4-0. In fact, to be fair, going into day 3 when they walk around and they have to do the battle ready check, and they put your and they give you, they say, oh, you have to be on a clock. I've never experienced this before. What is this?
Have you never had a clock before?
Well, I have used clocks, but it's never been enforced because I've never been undefeated on day 2, and then Zach liked to do that, so that was quite funny. So got past that one, and then so really happy with that matchup. Managed to just about pull myself out of it. It wasn't close in score, but the game was quite close because it was a very cagey game. His go turn didn't work, and then I can just. Exocrines are really good at killing Chosen. 3 wounds, damage 3, perfect profile for killing Chosen. Well, it's the toughness 4 damage. It's toughness 4 and 3 wounds versus strength 8 -3 damage 3 is just beautiful when it goes off. So managed to come to the Space Marine matchup, and then in the final round, we're up in of the Swiss round. We're up against Tristan, one of the Try Hard Gaming guys. Another guy who I've known previously through Warhammer, never played against him on his Leagues of Votan list. And we both stood at the top table going, where are we? Because this is unusual. Neither of us had been 4-0 at a tournament before. So one of us was going 5-0 for the first time. And he was on Leagues of Votan. Very scary, double land fort, 6 Sagittars list. No bikes. And this was the big thing for him. No bikes. He'd gone pure armor and 1 unit of 10 of the Terminator models with the Carl. And everything deployed on board again. For some reason, everyone liked deploying their entire army on the board against me. And I feel sometimes against Tyranids that's more advantageous as a Tyranid player, because then you can see what you're playing around. You can see where your opponent's moving. Again, he took Bring It Down and deployed Teleport Homers. And I went second and just racked up primary. This was the game where I sat 10 Termagants in a little L and scored 5 points for the entire game, and it was brilliant. It was just one of those ones where it was just one of those games. Tristan is one of the nicest guys you'll meet. I really love the guy. He's great, and it was a wonderful matchup. And it just unfortunately wasn't the greatest one for him, just because the more heavy vehicle list isn't as good into the Termagants, because 1 Sagittar output will kill 5, maybe 5 gaunts if you're lucky. Probably more like 2 or 3 with just hit wounds, because hitting on 4s, wounding on 2s. There is a failure rate in all of that. Plus you get a save against the bolt cannons, and it just meant that you could just sit on the objectives and just make it super difficult for him to pick them off. And also Votan really struggled to kill 3 Tyrant Guard and a Hive Tyrant. So taking Bring It Down, you can be a lot more aggressive with the Hive Tyrant, because they can't afford to shoot the Hive Tyrant, because then the Exocrine shoot them, and Exocrine shooting, being flat damage 3 and 9 wounds on the buggies is really good into that. You can take lethal hits on your whole army because you've got the 1 CP strat to do sustained when you need it. And you can and that -3 damage 3 is fantastic into the little buggy chassis. And I was just able to pick them off, and it just got to a point where the Trigon appears. The Trigon doesn't do a lot, but it puts him on a 0. He gets a 0 on primary on 1 turn, and that kind of kills the game. So just flood the board, take the center objective, he never targets one of the objectives, so don't even worry about it. 10 Termagants sit on the bottom one. I nick the middle one with a Termagant, and then the Trigon deep strikes down in his deployment zone, kills 5 guys, runs on his objective, and he gets a 0 in that turn. And I think that kind of killed the scoring that game, because I was getting 10s every turn, whilst also scoring secondaries. And it was a fantastic game. It was just, unfortunately, it kind of just stacked up against him too much too quickly by going first. And yes, he could spread the table, but he couldn't ever really get hold of anything that really mattered. And without the bikes, he can't really threaten 10 Termagants, whereas the bikes are really good at just doing that random threat into 10 Termagants.
Yeah, man, those bikes, the number of shots that they have is absolutely insane, right? And yep. I was very terrified of coming against Votan with the Unending Swarm for sure, with that threat. Cool. So that game's done. You've now gone 5-0. So most of the field is going home at this point. And I remember looking at you on the top tables. You had a big beaming smile on your face. You were very happy.
I was over the moon.
Yeah.
I wasn't quite sure what was happening because everyone was like, when you're on, it's something I've never appreciated. When you're on the top table, there's a huge amount of number crunching that goes on in the background of like point scoring because Nottingham going into it, everyone knew that Nottingham wasn't going to have a clean cut to the top four. It was going to have like 10, I think it was around 10 undefeated players. I can't remember exactly how many it was. And the, the people around were doing, oh, we think you're in. How many points have you dropped? And I'm just like, I don't know, guys. I'm 5-0. I kind of still. You've got to let me get my head around being 5-0 first for the first time in my Warhammer career. Let me get that in my head first, and then we'll worry about if I make the top four. And it was kind of just a whole day's thing because it was like we hadn't planned to go 5-0. Like we hadn't planned to wait for anything. Had I have not made the top four, I probably would have finished fifth, which would have given me potential, which would definitely would have given me best Xenos, best in faction Xenos. And it was more. I think it was more the fact that there was a 5-0 Tyranid player at this event, and then people would look at the army and go, "Hang on a minute, what's going on here?" And I was kind of just in this whirlwind of, "My God, I've just gone 5-0. Oh, hang on a minute, that means I might qualify for the Invitational at Eld." I was thinking down towards what I can do in the future and having more fun rather than, oh, I might be playing in the top four versus potentially one of the best players in the country in Europe. I'm like, okay, cool. I'm 5-0. And I think that took quite a lot of time to settle in until Zach finally came over and said, "Oh, by the way, if you hang around, you've made the top four." And I'm like, oh, okay, this is definitely happening. Because I think it's one of those hard things to describe. Like when you put a lot of effort into something, and it's the same with anything in life. When you achieve it for the first time, like I've played Warhammer for, well, I'll say I've been back playing Warhammer for 2.5 years now. I've probably played Warhammer for 10 years in my life. To come back to Warhammer, be a perpetual 3-2-4-1 player, and suddenly go 5-0, a super major no less, with the level caliber of player that's there, it's quite a moment to realize, hang on, I've managed to actually achieve something that I've kind of dreamed of achieving. But in that moment, it's just like, oh wow, I've actually done it. Like I play Warhammer for fun. Like I love the game, I really enjoy it, but I never expect. I don't play the same number of games as like yourself does or a lot of the others. So it's probably even more rewarding to go to hit that milestone because now I've done it. It's something I can say I've now succeeded and made a top cut of a super major. Now, just don't expect me to do it again anytime soon. Give me like another couple of years, I might achieve it again. But up until now, my success has been in team events. Like the last two ITTs, last year and the year before, I came second in 2 years ago and third last year with two teams, and it like all of those were surprises, but it wasn't an unbeaten record. There was a draw in one, and we lost, but we were the highest of the X1s on points last year because we lost to Team Poland last year. But it was the first time of like a single event to really succeed, and it was like, yeah, it was just a huge. It wasn't even a huge. It was just like this huge like feeling of, oh my God, I've achieved it. Like how many people can say they've gone 5-0, and it's just amazing feeling to have. So yeah, that was kind of. I'm still riding the high at the
Yeah, absolutely.
moment
Like
and
move
enjoying
forward.
it,
Right.
and it's yeah, I'll enjoy it for a long time still to come, just because it's one of those feelings of like, I'm not professional, I'm an amateur Warhammer player, but I can play at a level that allows me to get to that point.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
just really rewarding.
And then you went into that top cut against Jokel.
Yeah, I went into Yokel at the end of the game. We had a chat about it, and in his opinion, it's almost unwinnable for Tyranids. It's the hammer and anvil, so short table edge deployment, 6 objectives, and you cannot get around them to make any sort of flank play. And 10 Wraithguard is just obnoxiously hard to deal with in those scenarios because there's a lot of terrain in the center to hide them behind. And in the end, I got run out the game 100-76, which I'm still happy. I scored 76 points. I maxed secondaries out of nowhere. It's just it's really hard to hold primary versus 15 warp spiders. So I was really happy with really happy with how the game went. Yockel is an amazing person to play against, absolute gent, and I think it was at that point the result of that game was the less important thing to having that opportunity to play that game, because how many times are you going to play against Yockel and in that environment? And it was fantastic. It was really good. Josh Robertson, Ed Watts on the other table, and all these are like your household names on the top tables. Like everyone knows Josh Roberts. Like Ed Watts is another player everyone knows. Same with Yockel. And you just sat there going, I'm like, you're just seeing it, like these people, like they expect to be top four, like not expect to be top four. But it was very much that it was the euphoric moment of Jesus, where am I? Like, what am I doing up here? But no, it was great. I thoroughly enjoyed the game. It was very. I actually learned a lot out of the game, despite being beaten quite heavily. I did learn a lot, especially about Tyranids and kind of how I want to develop the list going forward. Even if Eldari does take the nerf, there was a lot of things I took out that game, both with the scoring, like I maxed my secondaries even if the primary was a problem, but it's how I then develop an ability to to play the primary game as well against those very powerful top tier armies, which may or may not be Eldari in some form coming out of the data slate, which we're due in the next week or so before the ITT in February, hopefully. But it's just one of those nice things to kind of get the grip, trying to get a bit of a grip of exactly what happens and how I can develop my list and my playstyle with Tyranids going forward, because I'm not putting Tyranids down anytime soon.
That brings us nicely on to, I suppose, what would be the changes you're looking to make?
So for me, there were always things going to be on the chopping block. The 6 Zoanthropes, they're really good into certain things. So they're amazing into a cursed cultist. Like they're the ultimate anti-accursed cultist unit. They will just nuke it. It's great. But they're very slow. They're 220 points, so it's quite hefty input. That's Maliceptor plus almost two Pyrovores, which is a lot more random stuff, and survivability goes up a lot more. So kind of the things on the chopping block at the moment are the Zoanthropes, most definitely the Broodlord. So someone asked a question earlier why it's 2 units of 5 and not a unit of 10. The Broodlord was there as a missile piece in anything that wasn't kill one, kill more, because I was only taking 3 characters. No one took fixed assassination against me, or it was a very bad secondary to take against me with only 3 characters. So he could run around on his own, and he will kill opposing characters. 6 attacks, 6 -2, 2 with dev wounds, twin linked. You can just charge into a character, epic challenge it out, and just fish for 4 or 6 dev wounds. And a lot of the characters that are being played at the moment only have like 4 wounds. So he needs 2 dev wounds and he kills it. So that was one of the reasons for that. So realistically, I'm kind of looking around because the army's still sat in boxes in front of me. So the list I want to develop at some point, and I'm starting to try to put it together at the moment. I want to have 2 Maliceptors. The problem with only having triple Exocrine is they're not the most resilient piece to just shove in the middle of the board. But also you kind of want line of sight with them. Because you've got the range, you want that flexibility. So I kind of want to get a couple of Maliceptors in the list, so then I can strat reserve 2 Exocrines without losing a huge amount of firepower, because a Maliceptor being toughness 11, having a 4-up invulnerable save, being -1 to hit in close combat, it's really survivable. Like I was talking to David at the end of the game with his Chaos Space Marines. The one thing in Tyranids that scares Chaos Space Marines is a Maliceptor.
Yeah, -1 to hit.
Chosen running, hitting on 4s. It's a big difference. Like that Lord with Demon Hammer, even if you have full rerolls to hit, you're still missing. Like 4+ to hit is a big difference from 3+ to hit. So I kind of want to put the Maliceptors in. So that's one piece, a couple of pieces going. Obviously, the Neurolictors, want to get at least 1 Neurolictor, preferably 2. I just think that the ability to target a unit multiple times with Battle Shock and steal a random objective off of someone without having to rely on a unit of 10 Termagants to do it's quite nice. So you can put you can tow a model on there and go, please take a Battle Shock. Okay, you passed it. Please take another Battle Shock. But it's more infiltrating things that are quite cheap and low NOP. Depending on how the format goes with indirect artillery pieces, your Biovore isn't always safe on your home objective. And I know it's not the greatest use for a Neurolictor, but having the ability to put a low NOP 65-point model on your home objective that cannot be shot indirectly I think is really important to have access to. Like normally your neurolictors will deploy and infiltrate, and that's what their main job is. But having the ability to put it on a home objective and go, you actually cannot do anything about this unless you come to me is quite a nice insurance policy that a
Yeah,
lot of teams don't have.
neurolictor deployment's interesting actually, because I think it almost depends on who you're playing. If you're playing Tau, you can be aggressive and forward deploy them, or for example, depending on the deployment or the terrain. But I was playing against World Eaters at the weekend. I kind of deployed them in the middle of my deployment zone because I knew that I was going to get hit, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, well, if I go second, these guys, I'm just going to battle shock everything that's right in front of me. And I think you can absolutely put a neurolictor on your home objective in those kind of scenarios, especially. I mean, I think a normal lictor is 60 points, right?
Yeah.
So that could be an option. I know a lot of people actually put Death Leaper on their home objective as well. So
Yeah, Death Leaper is the one that I always want forward.
yeah,
Just
yeah, he's awesome
he's
forward.
he's
Yeah,
got he's got the best of every world. He's got toughness 6, he's T7, and he's toughness 6, 7 wounds, and got a 4-up invulnerable save. He fights first. He's a lone op. He infiltrates. He has stealth. He has all the key rules that you care about. The most important being fight first, because if someone does run into him, you can pick a character out and kill it, and that does massively reduce the unit. And he's also not necessarily going to die on the way back, with 7 wounds being that nice break point of being an odd wounds into a lot of damage 2 or damage 4. But yeah, so kind of so the big things for me at the moment is the Maleceptors and the Neurolictors. Especially if combat gets improved, Maleceptors are fantastic because the -1 to hit aura is really obnoxious to play against, and also toughness 11, 3-up, 4-up, and a 5-up feel no pain because I will be playing Invasion Fleet is really hard. Is a very tough monster. Plus, it does start to extend your synapse range, which synaptic links out, which I did struggle with in one matchup, which was versus the Chaos Knights, purely because like you're rolling 2d6 on leadership 9, it's not ideal, but having more synapse creatures will be useful to go forward. I think the basis of the army I want to build is triple Exocrine, double Maleceptor, Death Leaper, double Neurolictor, the Biovore. I want to try a unit of 3 Pyrovores to bring them in from Strat Reserve.
yeah.
They come on, they've got 3d6 plus 3 flamer shots, but then also they overwatch really well in the following turn. And they're not they're not super hard to kill, but they're also not easy to kill, and they're 90 points. So I kind of want to try that out and play that one out. So
Yeah, I've had dreams. I've had dreams of making that work, and I just can't. Not in the current meta. Not in the current meta personally, but it's a shame they don't have the double profiles anymore. That's one of the things I miss, having the 2 different profiles. It just made them so strong.
Yes. So that's kind of where I want the list to go. I think I still want to try and fit a Trigon in.
I love the Trigon. And you did mention the Trigon in every game there.
Yeah, I keep trying to take the Trigon out the list, and then I realize what it does. I don't think in any games this weekend it actually earned its points back in value of models killed. But what it does do is it runs around your opponent's backfield going, I'm not irrelevant to kill. If you don't kill me, I'm holding this objective. If you do kill me, you've had to dedicate actual resources the wrong way. And then you could push up the table and hopefully punish that out.
Absolutely. Very cool. So obviously you've mentioned about what you changed. When is your next event?
So my next event's the ITT. I'm going with Team Get Fact again. Get Team FAQ'd or Fact, however you want to pronounce it. We managed to come third last year, so it was the team of myself, Mitch, Doug and Matthew Tabor, and then Tom Brown was on it. I think we've got Michael Hooper this year playing for us. So super hyped for that. Team events are literally my favorite event. I think they're the best ones to play at. I really enjoy them. They're the most interesting ones to play because you're playing with 5 mates, but you also then forget you're also playing against 5 friends as well. So you've got this. There's a lot more just random banter around the table because you've got 5 people who really get on well with each other, and 5 of you who really get on well with each other, and it kind of transfers across. So the games are really good. I think I've also played some of my most enjoyable games at team events. I played at the last one we did. I got to play versus Pumba of Team Poland with his Dark Angels versus my Iron Hands, and that was a fantastic game, absolute gent, but just really interesting, and definitely learn a lot from those games. So that's my next event, and then after that, probably the Oxford GT will be the next one.
Of course, yeah, that'd be nice.
Just because I'm 30 minutes down the road from the venue, so we take those.
Very good, cool. Well, that's all the questions I had. I know the chat has some more, so I'm just going to quickly run through those. I think the Doom Melon, great name, asked a bunch of questions, which I think you've nailed. The only one I think we've not covered is why Tyrant Guard when the output on paper seems low.
So, without okay, it's kind of this weird one. UKTC terrain has this really annoying habit of making it really difficult for monsters to walk around. There's a lot of there's no woods. It's all ruins. Um, the Hive Tyrant can obviously advance and shoot and gives an aura of that, but to get the Hive Tyrant into combat, and the Hive Tyrant is pretty decent in combat. 6, strength 9, -2 damage, 3 attacks that are twin linked, hitting on 2s, most likely with either lethal or exploding 6s. It's quite potent. And he has a real problem getting into combat, having to walk around ruins. So the Tyrant Guard is one of two things. One, it means I can take perfectly adapted on the Hive Tyrant rather than adaptive biology, which makes him a bit more survivable, means you don't have to spend a command point to reroll a charge because it's built it. So perfectly adapted from Invasion Fleet is the one that gives you either a reroll per turn of hit, wound, damage, save, charge, advance, or number of shots. I think it's a combination of those, and you get one each turn. So on your turn, it can be like a reroll save, or but in your turn, in your opponent's turn, it can be that. In your turn, it can be reroll hit, wound, or a charge, and it means you don't have to spend a command point on that. And his free command point his free strat can then be used on like an exocrine to reroll the number of shots. So you're rerolling ones because he will innately reroll charges. The Tyrant Guard give him the ability to extend his threat range because the Tyrant Guard can walk through the wall that he's next to. He walks around the wall, they walk through it, and then drag him into combat. So it's one of those weird ones because some of the UKTC terrain, for example, have an L here and then another one here, and he's got to do this little S, whereas they can just walk straight through and drag him into combat. So that was one of the reasons I had that Tyrant Guard. They were great in every matchup short of Eldari because the Incarn kills them really, really efficiently. They're 95 points. And against a lot of stuff with marine profiles, they do slap. Strength 8, -2 damage 2, twin linked. It does help a lot. But it just makes the Tyrant just an unappealing target to be shot at because they've got to get through 12 toughness 8 wounds with 5 at feel no pain before they can get to anything else. And he also then, it's a delivery mechanism. It gives him 12 wounds that are really difficult to get through. They're resilient. They're fairly decent in combat. They may not last for that much longer in the list, but in the current meta, with the amount of like one-shot massive cannon weapons, or 1 or 2 shot big weapons that wound them on 3s, it's actually really efficient to survive a Hive Tyrant because you can actually then stand in the open and shoot things because they'll be in cover with effectively a 2-up armor save.
Yeah, it really feels like you've put a lot of work into writing the list and building the list around the UKTC terrain as well, man. So big props.
It's all I play on. It's
Well,
all
yeah,
I play on,
exactly.
so might as well.
Yeah. We've got another question. Did John played with tactical?
So everyone thinks that Tyranids are great fixed objectives. The other truth is I am not. I am really bad at fixed objectives at the moment, and I am playing in a league at the moment with Tyranids where I'm trying to force myself to play fixed objectives. But the secret sauce I used is I played tactical in every single game. For me, the CP is super important. You do it allows you to be very not frivolous with it, but you can be a lot more heavy CP usage because you've got the free Tyrant strat every turn. So in your turn, it can re-roll a number of shots an exocrine gets. In your opponent's turn, it's a free 5-up feel no pain. But also at the same time, in your turn, you can also then spend your CP using, say, the Endless Multitude strat to regrow stuff. It means you can use a CP reroll and a CP reroll from the Hive Tyrant because you've got more CP. I just personally found that I was more comfortable playing tactical because of the way the army scores. You generally love tactical objectives, but also the tactical objective just being discarded to get more command points is really good. There was one game where, like for example, I was able to rapid ingress a Haruspex and heroic intervention the Haruspex, which is 3 command points. Now in fixed, I'm very rarely going to have that many command points. I remember the one time I did play fixed. I played fixed twice. One was against Tau Empire, and I really felt the lack of CP during the game. Like I really missed just having the ability to go right 5-up feel no pain there, command point here, free 5-up feel no pain there. interrupt as well and just dumping 4 or 5 CP because I had access to it does mean your opponent can't just freely roll into you and go, okay, I've got basically all the combats, because it's like, oh, I've got 2 CP here that I can interrupt at any point with something, and they have to then go to that combat first. So it's just one of those. I personally prefer tactical to fixed.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat, mate.
I just think I need to learn to play fixed. And actually, interestingly enough, all the top players say that they just play fixed. I played against Yokul and he took tactical as well. So that's quite interesting.
Yeah, I think I took fixed once at the weekend. I think it's just being able to see the matchup, you know. So you just look at the matchup and you go, actually, I'm feeling this time. It is so. You're right. The CP thing is a real issue, right? Our strats tend to be what make our detachments work. You know, if you're in Vanguard, you don't want to be missing out on Lone Up. If you're in Invasion Fleet, you don't want to be missing out on the 5-up Feel No Pain and CP rerolls, etc. So, man, like when you lose those stratagems, it's a real pain.
And even in like Synaptic Nexus, on your turn, you're going to always be using the reroll ones to hit and wound.
Yeah. Or the mortal strat.
Or the mortal strat. Yeah.
So good, man. When
And when you're playing fixed, you are very CP limited, and I just found that I preferred playing with tactical.
Absolutely. So we might not be able to answer this one, but they're doing Melon with another question. How does this play into Mech Death Guard and Morty or Iron Storm? I guess it's Space Marines. A lot of problematic matchups seem to be mass vehicles with a dangerous ranged output going wide.
That's Tyranids in a nutshell. Without trying to sugarcoat it, that's Tyranids in a nutshell. Your most efficient shooting platforms are Strength 10 and Strength 8. That's the way it is. You do slightly get away with it with having Invasion Fleet lethal hits. That's kind of why I feel that personally Invasion Fleet is the best detachment for Tyranids, because it's the most flexible. Because you can either go against a full infantry list or majority infantry list to get sustained hits, or mostly mechanized, and give yourself a bigger out versus the mechanized by having lethal hits. And if you roll 8 shots with an exocrine and roll 2 6s, it's basically 6 damage into something because it's got AP3.
Yeah, everything about that profile is amazing except the strength.
Exactly. So unless you can combo with the Neuralictor, and unfortunately a lot of vehicles have pretty good leadership, it's just one of those rough things that you have to just accept that it's probably one of the worst matchups you can play against us. But at the same time, it's not unwinnable because they don't necessarily always kill your monsters, and you have then a chance to shoot them back. But,
and you've got your screens and things as well, right? And you can put them in, as you say, with the World Eaters game. You pulled them into positions they didn't want to be in, and then blitzed them with exocrines.
And the other thing about mechanized gun lines is their OC's not great. They don't have great maneuverability around ruins. 10 termagants, 10 gargoyles can cause a real headache for those lists by just running into combat, tagging them in combat, but also standing on an objective. And it's like, you can stay in combat, but you won't be killing the thing that's in combat with you efficiently, because like a Lancer, for example, doesn't want to be tagged by 10 termagants because then it doesn't move. It's not going to kill 10 termagants or 10 gargoyles, and then you just regrow D3 plus 3 of them.
Absolutely. Jack's asked us here about Chaos Knights, but I think we answered that earlier, really, when you talked about your Chaos Knight matchup. So go back and watch that one, Jack. And then, apologies, I'm going to absolutely butcher this name. Pavli, how do you deal with the lack of synapse?
In this list, I got around a lot of it because it's a lot of MSU. 5 Gene Stealers, 3 Raveners. It's very hard to force, even Exocrines, it's very hard to force them to take Battle Shock, because to basically have them at Battle Shock, you almost have to kill them. So for me, it didn't matter massively. And it affected me like in a couple of instances, but none of them were game changing. That's kind of why I want to move more towards the Maleceptors, just to get that bigger synaptic web for the list. But it's something that, yes, it's a thing, but I think it's less of a thing than you might think, because very rarely in Invasion Fleet are you using the strats to target 2 units in synapse range. It's mainly targeting like 1 unit, for example, or the Hive Tyrant targets himself for free with the crit hits on 5s, for example. So it's kind of one of those ones where it's nice to have, and I definitely think I need to work around it more, but I didn't find it massively detrimental not having a huge amount of synapse.
Cool. Christopher Richardson, and I think he's asking us to predict the future here, but question for later. Where do you see the Nid meta going in the next 3 to 6 months? Are there any unexplored strategies or potential opportunities, spaces for the faction?
Yes. So I feel that at the moment the Tyranid power level is very much driven by this data slate. If it doesn't affect us massively and it hits the bigger armies, then I think we're in a pretty good place. We have natural counters. Big mechanized lists with big cannons are difficult for us to beat. I think that Tyranids will. I would like to think that Tyranids will continue to sit in the Goldilocks zone of that 45 to 55% win rate, and that's kind of what we should hope for them. You can definitely win tournaments with Tyranids. You can definitely run a tournament running into the matchups that aren't that punishing to you. 100%. Like I did it at the weekend, and I definitely didn't feel like I was positioned in the meta to do it, but I did run into a couple of good matchups and a couple of bad matchups that I still managed to dig myself out of. I would like for I think Tyranids have a real benefit that all of our detachment, like we have a lot of viable detachments, a lot more than others. Like Endless Swarm that you took, Davey, it can definitely win events. Assimilation is one of the weaker ones. Same with the Crusher Stampede, but Synaptic Nexus I think is a very unexplored one. Nathan Roberts took a triple Norn Synaptic Nexus list to Nottingham, and I think he didn't get great with he didn't do as well I think as he wanted to. But as a teams list, it's something you could really explore. Like a Norn sat on an objective, out OCs a Wraith unit, and the Wraith unit will not kill the Norn with a 2-up save and Armor of Contempt. That's just not happening. So there are definitely places to explore, but I think it will be driven a lot more by the data slate, and hopefully some of our more expensive stuff comes down because it's eye-watering how many points you pay for some Tyranid models that are
Yeah.
unplayable because of it. Thinking of you, Mr. Toxicrin, and the Screamer Killer. I would love the Toxicrin to be viable. That model looks mint. But
I'd love it to fit between two pieces of terrain, to be quite honest with you.
exactly. But you know what I mean? Like I think
Yeah.
I think Games Workshop could do with kind of dropping some of the points on some of our stuff.
Yeah, I think my take on this is Tyranids generally are like a mass. We've got like 46 data sheets. It's more than most other armies, and as a result, we have like a massive toolbox. And that leads into your point, John. Here is that a lot of our detachments are viable. So you can take like Synaptic Nexus. It's a little bit obscure. It's not like the most obviously this is the build you take. You can take the triple Morlock build that Eric Lathuris takes, which is wonderful,
Yes.
wonderful fun of just doing mortals to your opponent. You can take the shooting gun line, rerolling ones that John Lennon built. I'm sure there's other ones as well. I think I've seen a swarmy Synaptic Nexus list as well, where it was loads of termagants. So I think that's really the thing. So for me, the future of Tyranids really depends on what everyone else is doing because we will react to what they're doing. We will, without being a cheesy guy, we will adapt to what the enemy's throwing at us. But that's a cool strength, right?
We do have a we do have an incredibly deep codex in
Oh, it's
terms of
massive.
units. And we've got stuff that is unplayable at the moment due to points, but no one's explored it if the points came down with them. Like we haven't seen Tyrannofaxes around for a while, but they used to be a staple in lists when they were 200 points.
And they're
Uh,
still good. I took them. I
yeah,
was for my endless swarm list. I was trying them out, and even at 245 points, I was like, phew, I know I need to take these out, but I don't want to. You can in the UKTC terrain, you can get angles on a lot of things. So exocrines, for example, you put them behind a terrain piece, and they'll get shot still by your opponent. It's very hard to hide them where your opponent can't move and shoot them. So I was like, okay, well, Tyrannofax can just say, "Oh, you've wounded me." No, you haven't. Or you've done devastating wounds. No, you haven't. And
exactly.
then it gets a turn to respond, firing back. So, there is a lot to be said about that. Maybe
I
the
think,
-1 damage was a bit much, to be fair, when you think about it.
yeah, I think the only other one that kind of comes to mind, and it kind of solves of some of the anti-tank issues, is the DAC effects old one eye unit. I think that needs to be. I think there's a lot more to be explored in that unit,
Yeah,
especially in Invasion Fleet. Having 24 twin link, having 24 shots, re-rolling all rolls to hit, strength enough, AP2 damage one. You can blow up a
exploding
vehicle with
sixes,
that.
most likely.
Exploding sixes or lethal
Or
sixes.
lethals.
Talking to Nathan Roberts, it's like his favorite unit in Tyranids, and very like not many people take it. And I think at the moment, it's for those that do, it might not be the. It's a very hard unit to play with because of the effectively the
Size of
blistering
it.
assault rule.
Mm.
I'm don't own those at the moment, but it's definitely on my shopping list of things
He I played Nathan at Goonhammer when he had that list, and boy did it hurt. That was definitely the when he had not that list, sorry, that break, and
Yes.
it was savage. It was definitely the MVP of the game, and yeah, it's really really strong. It's just the size of the bases, man. It's so difficult
Yeah.
to
It's
fit
the
them in.
UKTC problem as well. Tyranids being a monster heavy list do suffer a little bit with the UKTC terrain setup. It's got a lot better over the years. The
Yeah,
terrain, Zach and his team have done a great job of developing that terrain. I remember at one point playing nights where you physically couldn't fit big knights through certain alleys. It was literally impossible. The base was too big. So they've done a huge amount of work developing the terrain, and it's still rough with monsters, but I think it's designed to be rough with monsters. And I think that's why having more utility pieces like Maliceptors allows you to out strat reserve your exocrines, for example. But it's definitely something in the. As long as Tyranids sit where they continue to do, I think we'll be fine. I just think that in the tank meta that exists, I don't think we'll do much better than we are at the moment because vehicles are still very hard to kill.
yeah, yeah. Well, let's see what the data slate brings in a couple of weeks,
Yes,
and maybe we'll
exactly.
make the call on it. But I think that's all the questions we have, John. So I think we'll bring it to an end. I'm going to go straight to bed because I am dying from COVID. Thank you very much for your time, John, and thank you everyone for joining us. We've got quite a few watchers here for us today, which has been brilliant. And yeah, come and join the Discord if you want to be involved in our chats on our Tyranid part of the 6++ Discord. Hopefully, see you there. Catch you later, guys.